When I look back into my oldest memories, as far back as I can go, there's one that always pops out directly to me. It's not something that happened to me, but a dream I remember having that scared me so deeply that I've never forgotten it. I see myself, only 4 years old, going into some kind of store or restaurant with my mom, clinging to her arm until I get distracted and see a poster or a toy of my favorite cartoon characters. I wander off alone to find it. I make contact with the wall and I fall through into a room made entirely out of dark, polished granite surfaces. I get up to see an endless hallway of eye-shaped statues in what I always thought of as some kind of museum, and then I wake up. When I started writing about the games I grew up with over a year ago, I always had Gary's Mod in the back of my mind as the most important one for me to eventually make the subject of a nostalgic, retrospective type video. But when I sat down and actually tried to play the game again, it felt wrong. After over half a year of trial and error and multiple scrapped essays, I decided I just wasn't ready to put my feelings about the game onto paper. 7 months of uploading nothing later, I think I've changed my mind. Hold on to that dream for a minute while I set the stage. Gary's Mod is a game or a social hub or a physics simulator. No matter how you label it, Gary's Mod was a monumental part of my childhood. Based on the source engine used to make such genre-defining games as Half-Life and Portal, Gary's Mod was unique for being almost entirely made out of user-generated content. Because of its vast popularity, it gained a reputation as a sandbox where players could do whatever they wanted, wherever they wanted, and with whoever they wanted. Starting in elementary school, I would waste countless afternoons hosting servers with friends where we'd do nothing in particular, and over the course of 6 or so years, I'd managed to log over 500 hours in the game. At the beginning of lockdown, I tried to come back to Gary's Mod for a nostalgia trip. I loaded up old maps in which I spent hundreds of hours without a care in the world in my childhood. It was uncanny. I felt afraid. Not the kind of horror movie jump scare afraid that usually comes to mind, but something deeper. It was an overwhelming, melancholic existential fear that came from the sheer emptiness of the familiar worlds I was exploring. All of these places were ones that I remembered being full of friends, joking around, building secret bases and vehicles, and now they were just empty. The reason it got to me so much was knowing that these places were permanently empty. My friends and I don't play Gary's Mod anymore, and most of the people I grew up playing with were people I lost contact with years ago. As dumb as it sounds, I was left only with the thought that these empty digital spaces would exist forever, unable to go back to the way I remember them. This unnerving feeling that I got from being alone in the game was one shared by many other players too, inspiring rumors of haunted maps and staged horror videos exploiting players' fear of isolation in the source engine. But to me in particular, it was immediately reminiscent of something else. Not so long ago, a trend started online that I was a bit obsessed with for a time. Because of its recent resurgence in popularity, a lot of you may have heard of the Backrooms, a kind of internet horror story that's been spread around and expanded on for the past 3 years. It goes like this. If you're not careful and no clip out of reality in the wrong areas, you'll end up in the Backrooms, where it's nothing but the stink of moist carpet, the madness of mono yellow, and the endless background noise of fluorescent lights at maximum hum buzz, in approximately 600 million square miles of randomly segmented empty rooms to be trapped in. Paired with the now infamous image of the empty office space, the story has popularized online discussion of liminal spaces. A liminal space is defined as a place that is transitional in nature, something connecting one location to another like a hallway or a waiting room. but the term has been more colloquially used online to describe a genre of images that invoke an unnerving, dreamlike nostalgia or familiarity in the viewer, usually taking the form of easily recognizable places that now appear empty. They're not really scary, just off-putting enough to suggest fear. Looking at this alongside the story's use of the popular video game term no-clip, meaning a player's movement outside of the physically defined boundaries of the world, made me start connecting the dots between the feeling invoked by liminal spaces and the way I felt returning to Gary's mod after so much time away, and I wasn't alone in this. It's no wonder that maps based on the Backrooms and liminal spaces were so easily recreated and published into Gary's mod itself, even re-sparking a bit of popularity in the game on YouTube over the past few years. Ever since I discovered this new blooming genre of liminal space horror online, it had a grip on me. I was addicted to this feeling of creeped out nostalgia that I got from the pictures associated with it, and the Source Engine's uncannily empty landscapes and interiors made me feel exactly the same way. Continuing along the same lockdown-inspired nostalgia trip, I kept looking for things that would bring me back to those earliest memories. I spent a lot of time in my early childhood in the Seattle Children's Museum. It's inside a big complex next to the hard-to-miss Space Needle. You might even be able to recognize it while flying over the city due to the gigantic spiders painted across the building's roof. When I looked online for pictures of the museum to bring back my fond memories, I was shocked. The pictures I saw on Google did not show the place I remembered. They looked fundamentally wrong. It seemed like a dream, a fictional place devoid of life. Seeing it gave me the same unnerving nostalgia of both Gary's mod and the Backrooms, and they eventually brought me back to the dream I had when I was 4 years old. The pictures I found almost perfectly fit the popularized aesthetic of liminal spaces that I'd become so familiar with. I didn't understand the connection. I couldn't. Something was so profound about that melancholic existential fear that I got from so many different places, and I couldn't place my finger on it. For a long time, I didn't write anything about Gary's mod at all, because I couldn't find the words to describe the way it made me feel. And as time went on, the idea of what I wanted the essay to be drew itself farther and farther away from Gary's mod itself. There's a statue near the entrance to the Seattle Children's Museum. It's not actually there anymore, but when I was young, it completely terrified me to be in the same room as it, to a point where I'd have to cover my eyes and hold my mom's hand to navigate my way through the room when we walked through. The statue is called Human Forms in Balance, and I got chills finding a single picture of it in its original location after not seeing the thing for at least a decade. Now I'm 17, and I've almost entirely forgotten that it existed, but remembering this one statue put the rest of my experience with Gary's mod into perspective. At the time, I never really knew why the statue scared me as much as it did, but seeing its black, shiny stone form again reminded me of the museum where I ended up in my Backrooms-esque dream, and made me remember the several subsequent dreams I had about being forever trapped in the room where Human Forms in Balance was displayed. I realized that overwhelming melancholic terror that I felt when returning to Gary's mod was a feeling I was familiar with throughout my entire life. All of these experiences had the same motifs in common: isolation, nostalgia, and the feeling that it was going to last forever. Seeing Gary's mod years after I'd stopped playing it made me so afraid of letting go, and it was because I knew the game would never go back to the way I remembered it. The same way the children's museum I grew up going to would never go back to the way I remembered it. Even when I was 4 and dreamed about being eternally lost in a dark granite museum, it was so memorable because I was afraid that I could never go back. Maybe this is just me emotionally over-dramatizing the process of growing up, but Gary's mod showed me what I was truly afraid of: losing things forever. Being on lockdown for over a year was by no means a good thing, but without it, I never would have had the chance to sit down and reflect on my own life and the things I feel nostalgia for. As corny as it sounds, I feel grateful for Gary's Mod because looking back on my memories with it almost a year ago helped me understand myself more than I did before. Change, especially permanent change, is scary, and I wish I could say that understanding that feeling made it go away, but it's not that simple. It's part of being human, and I think I'm okay with that. I used to try playing Gary's Mod to rekindle that childlike wonder it used to ignite in me, but growing older has fundamentally changed the way I feel about the game. That feeling isn't going to come back, and that's okay. It's okay to let things go.